I thought these games were supposed to be shorter, 3 hours and 38 minutes. This pitch clock thing is a farce, right?
Well, maybe here I think they had 4 shutouts elsewhere, or 5, 4 anyway, and then it was 2-1 game last night. So that probably lowered the average. There were a lot of them in the 2s there, but there were 11-7s, I think, in Texas and Philadelphia, and then it was a 10-9 in Boston and 10-9 here. And my theory on this is, if you have a game like that, people don't realize how long it's lasted anyway.
100%.
You had 5 lead changes, for crying out loud, in the last, 4 or 5 innings. What more do you want?
That was awesome. I was being facetious because actually, if you add up all the games yesterday, and including the high-scoring and lengthier games that you mentioned, it was the average game time for this opening day compared to last year was down by like 24, 25 minutes, and that's with a few shoot 'em ups occurring on opening day. I stayed up last night because I wanted to watch Ohtani start and hit, and I'm thinking I had the former mindset of thinking like, well, this game starts like 9:30 St. Louis time or whatever, and I said, so I don't know if I can make it through it all, but the game moved by so quickly, it was over by midnight, which meant that it was like a 2 hour, 30, 35 minute game.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, I can watch more late night baseball now. There's another attribute to that. It is. Well, I love the late night games.
I mean, I think this might actually work because the Blue Jays especially put this to the test. They made, I think, like maybe 7 pitching changes, and they made 5 of them in the middle of an inning. That means the guy's got to run up in the bullpen, take the ball, get a little chit-chat from the manager, and then walk off. The whole process takes 5 minutes for each guy,
I didn't even realize he made 5. I know that they used 8 pitchers. I had no idea. I don't know what I was watching. I was watching, but it just didn't occur to me that he had 5 pitchers in 1 inning.
The only guys, well, he made 5 pitching changes.
Changes, yeah.
During an inning. Like the last guy, Romano, started the inning, and only one other guy that he brought in started an inning. And the other 5 relievers all came in during the middle of an inning, including twice and 2 guys in the same inning.
Commish, yesterday, we'll get into a lot of this stuff, but it sounds like that this knee contusion that afflicted Wilson Contreras yesterday is not a big deal. The Cardinals are saying day to day after he underwent tests. So if that's the case, I guess there's not too much to worry about. You agree?
Well, I mean, he it didn't hit him flush on the knee. He did have a shin guard on at the time. That maybe taken a little bit of the blow away. I wouldn't think he'd be playing tomorrow, maybe not Sunday, but you got till Monday night to get him back in there, so maybe that's a reasonable expectation. Or if he misses 3 games, that's why you have a backup catcher. You don't need to bring anybody else up yet. If he can't play, when they get ready to go on this trip to Milwaukee and Denver next week, then you're going to have to do something. But that wasn't the only injury they had yesterday. Gallegos hurt his back doing something or other in the pregame exercising, and that would have changed how they would have handled the 8th and 9th innings, which weren't, handled very well by Hicks and Helsley.
What do you think? Marmol said something to the effect that he would have used Helsley in the 8th and Gallegos in the 9th. Is that to just try to work around? I don't know. In fact, don't let me theorize. What do you think that was all about? Why would he have wanted?
Well,
to
sometimes
do that?
If he's got some hitters that he wants them to face, he would pitch the 8th, for instance. I'd have to go over my scorebook to see which guys are actually up there. But sometimes he would do that to face the better part of the lineup. With Toronto, they have a lot of better parts of their lineup. They're not the same Blue Jays that we've been used to seeing, albeit on small occasions, hitting home runs all over the place, or at least trying to when they come in here. They had 16 singles and 3 doubles and had 19 hits, and I dare say they've never had 19 hits without a home run.
That's pretty good. Yeah, you're right. I'd find that hard to believe. So that's good. That's a good point. What stood out to you yesterday on the Cardinals side? What impressed you the most? They had quite a few positives. They had some negatives too, but they had quite a few positives.
Well, Donovan had a terrific game. Contreras was playing well. He had a couple of hits and threw out a guy stealing. It does make you wonder if when Wednesday's Miklasz turn comes up, that even if Contreras is all right, maybe Kisner could catch that day game after a night game. Let's say Contreras would be able to play Tuesday night and catch Kisner Wednesday afternoon. At the end of a 3-game series with the Braves, there's a day off the next day, too, where Contreras would get 2 more days off. Mm-hmm. And B is that Kisner and Miklasz have established a pretty good rapport the last couple of years here. And maybe, I didn't think, even though there were a lot of soft hits off Miklasz yesterday, I mean, they didn't get him out. He pitched, didn't last past 4 innings. And maybe another catcher who's been successful with him might be the way to go occasionally to see if that might have some merit to it.
Well, there's that's been a pretty common thing over the years, really. I know the Cardinals. You can fill me in on some of that because I'll embarrass myself by leaving some of these out. But when Tim McCarver was in Philadelphia, like later on in Philadelphia, I mean, he was Steve Carlton's personal catcher. And, there's always personal catchers. I'm just drawing a blank to name them, but it's kind of a customary thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with it either because you're going to have, you got to give your starter a day off, your starting catcher at least one day off a week, and especially if a guy's got a knee that may be a little tender. But, yeah, as long as Kisner's up here, it makes perfect sense for him to be paired with Miklasz. There's no doubt. They did do well last together.
I can't remember the precise pitcher, but even Cody McKay was somebody's personal catcher for a while. Was it Suppan or somebody? About 15 years ago. I mean, remember that? He was somebody's personal catcher.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so much of that. Earl Weaver used to do that with his catchers in Baltimore. I think even Vic Rosnovsky was somebody.
Oh, there you go.
Clay Dalrymple. I think they were somebody's designated catcher, So that kind of stuff cracks me up. Did Whitey ever do that with any of his guys?
I don't think so. But he had, for the first 5 years of his tenure here, or at least of 81 through 85, those 4 years, he would platoon Porter anyway with either Tennis for the first couple of years or Tom Nieto for the last 3 years when Darryl was here because Darryl wasn't hitting left-handers very well. And Nieto, as a matter of fact, with all the left-handers the Royals had in the 85 World Series, Nieto ended up starting 5 games of the 7.
Wow. Now that you mentioned that I didn't remember that. That's pretty amazing.
They had Danny Jackson and they had Lee Brandt, pitching a lot of games there.
Yeah. Rick Hummel with us here on the Bernie Show. He does this every Friday, usually at 5:00. Every now and then we have to change it a tad if he can do it. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but what do you expect from Jack Flaherty tomorrow? Tough matchup against Kevin Gausman, who's had 2 really good years in a row, one for San Francisco and last year with Toronto. But what do you expect for Jack?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's a matchup against Gausman as is the matchup against the Blue Jays. Jack got under some of his pitches in that 24-1 debacle against Houston. Appeared to have straightened it out in the last couple innings that he pitched, but they don't have that fallback where if a guy gets to 25 pitches or so in one inning, you say, let's take him out and I'll put him back in the next inning. You take him out, he's out. He's not going back in.
I'm just really looking forward to this because I sort of took a vow not to get too fired up one way or the other, negatively or positively, based on what he did in spring training. Because my thing was like, look, the real baseball is about to start, so let's just wait. We'll get our answers. So I'm really curious about that one tomorrow. Commish, a couple other things to talk about. What did you think of, because you've sat through so many of these, just the opening day ceremonies. I mean, I really thought they did a terrific job, but what did you like about it?
Well, there's never a downside to the Clydesdales romping around the track for one lap. Billy DeWitt told me the other day, he said somebody said they suggest you go around for 2 laps, but that would kind of mess up the timing of the affair, so he settled for 1. I was surprised to see Roland come out of the dugout. I thought Roland might come out on a car by himself, but that was okay. It was nice to see. Joe Torre was a surprise entry. He was. He was not on the original list. Now, Mike Shannon didn't make it, and Tony La Russa, they tried to get to come in on a private plane, and he was going to do it, and then he had some health setbacks, as it were. Nothing spectacular, but he just couldn't. He didn't feel like he was ready to fly anywhere from Arizona to here, so he was very apologetic about that. But everybody else, I mean, it's good to see McGuire back here. That was good, and Ozzie, of course, and Whitey are regulars, and Vince Coleman and Ray Langford are regulars now too. They don't miss many parties here. John Tudor, of course, Roland was here, and Holliday is the newest Cardinal Hall of Famer, and Simmons. So that was a pretty good group. Now you think back to, well, I guess they're old days now. You're going back probably, I think about maybe 10, 11 years was the last time Stan came in, and they'd have their ceremony, they'd have the goers going around the track, and then he'd come in on that golf cart from the right field wagon gate. He wouldn't go the whole circle. He'd just come in, and he'd get up, and he'd do that crazy corkscrew stance, whether he was 90 or 30, and you're saying, please, God, don't let him fall down. And he never did.
He never did. That's right. Yeah, it's always sad to kind of look down there and see the that this group of those just immortal players that.
Well, Bruce didn't make it. Bruce Sutter died in the last few months, and so did McCarver more recently than that, who's a Cardinal Hall of Famer and a broadcast wing Hall of Famer, and one of the most revered players in Cardinal history. I mean, Bruce Sutter played here 5 years, and McCarver played here 2 different tenures. He had maybe 3 years the last time, and he had about, he must have had 8 or 9 the first time around.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. That we're all going to graduate to the place upstairs, hopefully.
We're hoping, yes.
Yes. It's inevitable that will happen, no matter what the final destination is. I'm with you. I'm not sure where I'm going to be going, but anyway. No, but it's just sad not to see him there. I mean, we know that they're not going to be there, but it's just like you think about past days. It's kind of past years, I should say, and that was just they were just such fixtures on opening day. But nobody does Nobody does opening day better than the Cardinals, and that's not. That's not being a homer. It really isn't. I mean, you've been to a lot of home openers around the circuit in your distinguished career, and I've hit quite a few other places myself. Not as many as you, of course, but it just makes me appreciate the scene and the ceremonies on opening day in St. Louis. I mean, it's really just fantastic every year.
Well, there's nothing like it, and in 3 years we don't have to wait for Pujols and Molina to go into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. They're eligible for the Cardinals Hall of Fame after only being out 3 years, I believe. So they can be in that one soon. Whenever they'll be here soon enough, going around the track and standing there. But all the messages that these guys genuinely deliver to these current players when they pop out of their trucks, I mean, they call them aside and say, whatever, have a good year, we're pulling for you. It isn't like they're just shaking hands and like, who are you? They know who they are.
Commish, you wrote for the Post-Dispatch, STLtoday.com, where you talked about the returning Red Jackets, and you did talk to La Russa, who made a pitch for Jim Edmonds getting into the Hall of Fame. For people who didn't read that story, and they should, it's still there, obviously, at STLtoday.com. What was Tony's outlook on Jim Edmonds and why he thinks Jim should get stronger consideration?
Well, first of all, he pointed out that you're competing against people in your own generation at your position. Like he says, he's not competing against Joe DiMaggio, for instance, but I went back and did some research, and the year that Jimmy came on the ballot the first time was the year that Ken Griffey Jr. came on the ballot for the first and only time. So a lot of times people weren't voting for 2 center fielders then. Remember, you go way back to Ozzie Smith coming on the ballot in like 2002, let's say. Alan Trammell came on the first year. Well, it took Alan Trammell forever to get in the Hall of Fame because he got about 10% of the vote the first year because Ozzie had 90.
Right, that's right.
And and then Tony said that if Jimmy had there's a lot of competition in the outfield at that position, center field with defense and offense. But he said he played 17 years, and he from what I've seen, he belongs in. And the bad part was for the people at home listening to this is that he didn't last past one election. Jim didn't because he didn't get 5% of the vote. He had only 2.5% or 11 votes. And that, even with Griffey on the ballot, that seemed a little light.
It was ridiculous.
And Roland at least got 10% of the ballot to stay on, and he was on with Chipper Jones and Tomey and Trevor Hoffman and Mike Messina and Edgar Martinez and Vladimir Guerrero. That's and Clemens and Bonds and Schilling. He was lucky to stay on that ballot, and he did. And now look where he is.
Commish, one more, well, at least one more thing for you. I actually want to get your take on the Final Four, but before that, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Jordan Walker and first impressions. Again, in a way, it's kind of a silly question, but people want to know what you think because you're the commish. What did you like? Did you enjoy watching him play? He was so excited. Loved the energy. Obviously, he's also a very imposing figure in the batter's box. Those are my two observations.
Well, the second one for sure, and the first one, he didn't look embarrassed. He struck out once, and he singled. He had a force-out grounder that drove in a run. I don't know what the Blue Jays were thinking. They had the bases loaded, and they in a tie game, and there was nobody out in a later inning, and there was a ground ball to shortstop that Walker hit. And that ball's got to come home, in my way of thinking. Now, maybe the Blue Jays knew that both teams were going to score a zillion runs in the last three innings. I don't know, but Bichette decided to go to second, but he bobbled the ball for just an instant. Yeah. That was way too much time to get Walker. And even if they had got him, the Cardinals still get a run and go ahead. But Walker zipped down there, so that's where he's going to beat out infield hits and keep his average from ever going under 200 or 190 or anything like. He played okay in the outfield. He kind of boxed one ball a little bit, but he made some strong throws and threw to the right base. And they're handling him just right. They're batting him eighth, where when he gets more comfortable with the league and shows he belongs up on the lineup, well, he'll move up in the lineup to 2 or something like that. But they don't need him up there now. They got Donovan and Nootbaar, and then the Mashers in the middle, and then you got O'Neill and Gorman. I mean, where would you hit him? I mean, Edmonds hitting ninth. He's a pretty good player, hitting ninth.
Yeah, it makes sense. No, I love the lineup composition yesterday. Commiss, what do you think? What in the world was skipper John Schneider thinking in that eighth inning, where you got Arenado up and in a very dangerous situation, runners on, and the Blue Jays lead by a run, and you got Andrew Kisner on deck, and I think, I don't know, 100% of the time, the situation would dictate. You bet. Look, we ain't gonna let Arenado beat us. Four fingers, Yeah. You walk him. What in the world was he thinking? And I think he did a fine job for the Jays last year. I mean, I'm not calling him names or anything. I was just astonished.
Well, there were both managers I had some quarrel with yesterday. Earlier on, it was 2 outs and nobody on in the sixth inning, I think. Schneider brought in the only left-hander he had to face Donovan and Nootbaar.
Right.
And I guess he was thinking, well, he'll surely get one of them out, and I won't have to start in the next inning. I'll bring in somebody else because Goldschmidt was coming up. Well, Donovan and Nootbaar both got on, and suddenly here's Goldschmidt as batting, and the pitcher's got to face 3 hitters, and Goldschmidt singled and drove in a run. I mean, these other guys, the guy that was pitching before that, who already got the first 2 outs of the inning, couldn't get one more, and then even Skipper Marmol, he had a chance to walk Guerrero with second and third. Now, you had a pretty good hitter coming up after that. You had Varsho, the left field. You didn't have Kisner coming up, but still, you put him on. You get a force-out situation. He had and he blooped a single to right, and the Blue Jays went ahead. So, I mean, there's a reason why, as Whitey used to say, these guys are making all that money. And when he said that, it was like $1 million, when he said that 40 years ago. Now it's $20 million or $30 million.
That's right. That's fun.
But Guerrero is one of the top shoot, 10 hitters in the game. Maybe that seems reasonable.
Yeah, you're so right about that. I didn't, for some reason at the time, I didn't pick up on that, and I should have, but I'm also at home and, having laughs and side conversations and everything else. So,
well, it's one of those deals where you just don't let that guy beat you. If Varsho, who's a fine player, got him from Arizona, hitting fourth, left-handed hitter, beats you, well, okay, but make him beat you. Don't let Guerrero get a chance to beat you. I don't care how far he hits it, 160 feet, which he did, or 460 feet, which he could have.
From the Cardinals standpoint, I hope other managers make that mistake this year in terms of, oh man, you got Donovan and Nootbaar, two left-handed bats. Okay, as I bring in my lefty now, sometimes that'll make sense, I guess. But those guys were. Look up the numbers. I mean, I've written them and mentioned them a bunch of times. I don't have them in front of me. Both of those guys were terrific against left-handed pitching last year. I mean, outstanding, well above average. And so, I wonder if some other managers will be walking into that trap this season. I would say yes. How many times, I don't know.
Well, historically, when we see these American League teams come in here, other than maybe Tampa Bay, they haven't all managed, the way the front office might send down the sheets to manage it. When Tampa Bay used to come in here, they just tried to hit the ball to the Hilton Hotel every time they came in, and sometimes they did. But Coach Mattingly, now the new hitting coach there, maybe that's Donnie Mattingly was always about putting the bat on the ball, and these guys are doing that now.
They are. They definitely are.
And I think that but Schneider doesn't strike me as a real tactician. That isn't all of it. You got to know, which guys to play and so forth, and keep a good attitude going. And he was an interim last year, and they had a good season until they self-destructed in the ninth inning of that playoff game with Seattle. They should have won that game. They might have won the series, but they lost in 2 games.
I'm sorry. Finally, Commish, because we got Amon Brennan coming up here in a few minutes, so I better move it along from you. Not that I want to, but that how it goes. But just real quick, I mean, the lines have been shifting in the semifinals. I mean, San Diego State earlier today was a 3-point favorite in some shops. Now they're down to 2.5. And UConn earlier today went from a 5.5 favorite to now it's down to 5 over Miami. Who do you think's going to win these 2 games or cover?
Well, Connecticut has the best of the 4 teams, at least for the first 2 weeks of the tournament. They've had double-figure wins every time. Now they didn't maybe play, all the greatest teams, but they beat Gonzaga last week like Gonzaga hadn't been beaten in a long time. That was they clobbered them.
It's great.
I would say don't forget about San Diego State because they play a little differently than everybody else. They're old, first of all. They did a little work in the transfer portal, and they had some guys coming back anyway. And they don't mind knocking you around. Now, it depends who's officiating these games. Some of those might be fouls now, but they weren't fouls last week when San Diego State was playing. Who were they playing? Creighton. And unfortunately, there was a foul call later in the game, but that's the way it goes, I would take them as my long shot winner here, just because they have enough moxie and enough talent to win, and they don't. They'll bruise you, and they'll make you. They're the one team that will make you come out of your game. San Diego State doesn't really. That is their game. They're trying to make you come out of yours.
It's something Mike DeCourcy mentioned when he was on the other day, and it resonated with me, is that, a lot of teams ideally, want to have a big scorer, a go-to guy, right? But sometimes, Brandon, the kid from Alabama, Brandon Miller, I think. Yeah, sorry, I should know his name.
That's all right.
When he couldn't make any shot against San Diego State last week, Alabama had nothing to go to. And Mike DeCourcy made the point that there's no, quote, superstar offensively. Their leading scorer averages 12.5 points. But they have a lot of different guys who can score. DeCourcy's point is like, well, if the guy that Matt Bradley, who's their leading scorer, if he's not hitting them, someone will come out of nowhere and, get on a run, and then it'll be someone in your rotation that you don't necessarily think of as a scorer, but will start knocking down shots. Then this guy knocks down shots, and then that, they really spread it out. And I think in some ways that makes them kind of dangerous because they're not overly relying on one guy.
You're right. I mean, they got maybe they don't have any hesitation about which guy should have the last shot. Any of them could have it if they need to have a last shot. And their coach, Brian Dutcher, was an assistant for Steve Fisher, good Lord, 20-some years at Michigan and San Diego State both, right? He learned something, I think.
Right. Well, Commish, I picked the UConn at the beginning of all this, and I admit that they look unstoppable. But I'm hoping for a San Diego State UConn final. I really am, because even though UConn's excellent defensively in their own right, but just to see them go at it. I mean, see if San Diego State can slow them down. That San Diego State gives them the best chance of somebody knocking off UConn. I'm not overlooking Coach Larinaga in Miami, but because they can score, but they're terrible defensively, and there's no way they're going to shut down UConn enough times in that game tomorrow night.
And before we go, real fast here,
sure,
counting the NIT with North Texas and UAB in the final and Florida Atlantic, this is emblematic of the way the college basketball season. Three of those three teams, Florida Atlantic, UAB, and North Texas, were in the same league, the Sun Belt.
Outstanding, right?
Mighty Sun Belt.
Outstanding. Well, Commish, have a great weekend, a great week. We'll talk again next Friday.
You got it.
All right, that's our friend Rick Hummel, the great baseball writer, one of the best of all time, and he's in the Hall of Fame for his decades of reporting.